Well, good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Great to see everyone here. Today, we're in our final week of our Didache series. The dates show that it goes till the 24th, but we had a different sermon last week. As I mentioned last week, Didache just didn't feel right for the week I had, and if I were to report back, I wouldn't say my week got any better than the week before. If you weren't here last week, I titled that sermon, actually, it's probably one of my favorite titles I've ever come up with, The Rocks Beneath Rock Bottom. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, you can go online. One of my favorite sermons, actually, for the year. That's typically what happens. You go through something really difficult, and you find the little glimmer of hope in the midst of it. And one of my friends, he goes, I think you should probably speak. This was before even last week. He's like, it's kind of like your therapy session. But I guess, I don't know, maybe you're all my shrinks or something. I'm not sure. If you're new, you're probably wondering what is going on. Just lots of things have been happening in our home and a lot of damage since March 8th. We've had a tarp in the back, obviously some health challenges that we've been going through as well at home. So it's been a very rough year. And when you go into a year, you have all these expectations and you anticipate what the year is going to look like. And then all of a sudden the floor gets pulled out, the rug gets pulled out from under you. And it doesn't feel good when you're moving in a particular direction and all of a sudden life takes a turn. And that's kind of what it's felt like for me over the past couple of weeks. And what's helped me get through is what I talked about last week, and always looking for that glimmer of hope because it's always there. And I thank all of you for your texts, your emails, checking in on me. We had a meeting, actually, where we talk about social media. We meet about once a month. And I looked at my calendar the morning. It was Thursday morning we had the meeting. I'm like, okay, I need to remember we have this meeting. I should text Sammy just to remind me again as the day goes on, because Thursday was quite a long day dealing with different things around the house. I didn't get to text him, but luckily Jeanette sent an email out, and then Sammy texted me, and they reminded me, you have a meeting tonight. Send the Zoom link out, and everything went well with that one. But today we have a sermon on the Didache, and if you are just joining us, or if you need a refresher because it's been a couple of weeks, the Didache is one of the earliest documents that we have about what the early church was all about. The Didache was written in the 1st century, and it was a primer. It was a how-to for the followers of Jesus, as these first followers of Jesus were trying to figure out, how do we make this work? What does it mean to follow Jesus with our lives? And the Didache, it was meant to be a preparation for baptism. So if there was someone and they said, I want to commit my life to following Jesus, I want to be a part of this community, I want to walk in a particular direction, be a particular type of person in the world, and if I recognize this new creation that has been offered to me, this invitation of new life and salvation through Jesus, and I want to continue moving fully in that direction, you would go and you'd get baptized. And the Didache would prepare those being baptized for what they were signing up for, what their life was to look like. We've been going through the Didache for, I think we've had 3 or 4 sermons on it throughout the month of May. And I want to end with one final topic that's in the Didache, and we are going to be celebrating this morning. It's known as, title, A Feast for All. And we're going to be celebrating Eucharist, which I absolutely love calling this ritual Eucharist. And I know oftentimes people are like, well, that sounds really Catholic. Are you a Catholic church? No, but Eucharist, it comes from 2 Greek words, eu and charis, eu meaning good, charis meaning gift. The Eucharist is the good gift of Jesus. I absolutely love being reminded of that truth, which is, for me, why I call it Eucharist, because on a regular basis here at Awaken, we remember the good gift of Jesus that brings new life and hope and light from the darkness that we often face. It brings wholeness to our lives. So it's known as Eucharist. Other times we call it the Lord's Supper. It's also known as communion. We will be celebrating, partaking together of this ancient ritual that has roots from 2,000. Honestly, even before that, there were inklings of it all throughout the Old Testament. But I want to talk a bit about what we're doing when we celebrate Eucharist. Why do we do it? What is it a reminder of? And what are we partaking of together? Let's begin here in Luke chapter 22. This is known as the Last Supper. Jesus is dining with his disciples right before he is arrested and goes to the cross. They're sharing this meal together. After taking the cup, he gave thanks, Jesus gave thanks and said, "Take this, divide it among you, for I tell you, I won't drink again from the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." He took bread, he gave thanks and broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." This ritual that we shall be practicing together is something that the first followers of Jesus have been doing from the very, very beginning. This is something that is 2,000 years old. And as we'll see as we go through this sermon, is that it's taken different forms throughout the years. Ever since the beginning when Jesus instituted this until now, it has looked quite differently, but the meaning behind it has remained the same. And that's what I want to talk about this morning, the meaning behind why we do it. Because sometimes there's a ritual that you practice and it just becomes common, it becomes ordinary, it loses its value or its significance. I don't want that to happen because there is something quite powerful when we share in this ritual together. There's something that we are declaring. There's something that we are being invited into. And when you just go through the motions, it can kind of strip away the meaning and the depth to it. And that's what I want to look at, the depth of this practice that we do regularly here at Awaken. As I mentioned, the Didache comes from the 1st century. This actually predates some of the letters, the Gospels that you would find in your New Testament. The Didache is a very, very early document that gives us a glimpse into how the first followers of Jesus were putting their faith into practice. And as we look at it, it has all sorts of implications for us in our lives and how we put into practice what it means to follow Jesus, even in the 21st century, which, yes, it looks different than 2,000 years ago, but the meaning behind what we do and a lot of the themes and the wisdom still applies to us today. Here's how the Didache talks about Eucharist, Lord's Supper, communion. Now, this is how you should engage in giving thanks. I love that right there. This is meant to be a practice where you are being thankful. You're giving thanks. Your heart is being filled with gratitude. There's lots of research in the world today about the power of gratitude. When we pause for a moment to be thankful for what we have been given, it does something to our hearts. It changes our perspective. Here is how you should engage in the practice of gratitude. Bless God in this way. Here's how you honor God. Here's how you offer praise to God. First, at the cup, you say, "We give thanks to you, our Father, for the holy vine of David, your servant, which you have made known to us. Through Jesus, your servant, to you be glory forever." Then, when it comes to the broken loaf, say, "We give thanks to you, our Father, for the life and knowledge which you have made known to us. Through Jesus, your servant, to you be glory forever. For as the broken loaf was once scattered over the mountains, then was gathered in, became one, so may your church be gathered together into your kingdom from the very ends of the earth." Few themes for us to look at. First, when we practice Eucharist, is it okay if I call it Eucharist? We're not going to think I'm too Catholic? We okay with that? When we practice Eucharist, there is a sense of unity amongst all of us. Two questions. First, how many cups are there? One cup. It's the chalice that Indiana Jones was looking for. There's one cup. We all share one cup together. Second question, how many loaves of bread? There's one. We all share one cup and one loaf. In other words, we're saying we are one. This isn't something that we do individually. This is something that we do communally, together. Have you ever gone to a celebration where you would have one of these cakes, otherwise known as a wedding? Have you ever been to a wedding before? All right, some of you have been to a wedding. Some of you have even been at your own wedding. What happens? When is it? I don't even remember. I forget. It's during the first dance. When do you take the cake? Any wedding experts after? Okay, it's been a while. It's towards the end, right? Normally you're like, all right, let's just stick around. If you don't know the person that well, you're like, let's stick around until the wedding cake, and then we can silently make our way out. I know some of you are like that. You're like, once the cake comes, I'm out the door. Well, all right. Sorry, Sammy. I heard a few nervous laughs. All right, we're tracking you down. The thing about a wedding cake is that all of the guests share one cake together. Same thing with the birthday party. You have a birthday cake, you cut the cake into different pieces, and then everyone gets a slice. There's one cake, and everyone joins together. In other words, everyone is saying, we're celebrating. If you're at a wedding, we're celebrating this couple, their love, their union, their marriage. If you're celebrating a birthday, we're celebrating this person's birth. So when we celebrate Eucharist, it's almost like we're at a wedding, and together there's one cup, there's one loaf of bread. We are celebrating together. We're united together. We're giving thanks together. And what happens at a wedding, it's pretty much the same thing that happens when you're at a church service. You're participating in Eucharist because you're sharing one cup and one loaf of bread with those that you know, that you have a deep relationship with, probably. But at the same time, you're also sharing that one cup and that one loaf with those that you maybe have never met before. And what that does, it unites us. Even though you may not know the person who, as we file down here a little bit later, is standing behind you or in front of you, you're realizing that through Jesus, we're all united together. There's actually this practice in the early church. If a community of Jesus followers was celebrating Eucharist, and they would every single time they got together, this was actually a practice that was done quite regularly, they would take a piece of that loaf and they would have a messenger who would bring it maybe next door, down the street, to the next town, the next village, to share it with another group of Jesus followers. Remember the first time that I read about this, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. We celebrated Eucharist. This is way, way back when we were meeting in a cafeteria in White Plains. And I took a piece of that loaf and I dropped it off at another local church one morning because I thought this experience and practice was so profound. There was something to it where we say we're gathering together and we're celebrating as a community, but that doesn't make us separate from all the other communities and churches of those who are following Jesus. And together, this practice unites us and it brings us together. And when we share it, we are celebrating in unison. Now, what exactly are we giving thanks for? What are we celebrating together? First off, for the first followers of Jesus and for us as well, we're celebrating our identity, who we are. This is just like baptism. Baptism is a practice when you are publicly recognizing this new identity that you have through Jesus. There's this new life that you've experienced, this sense of salvation, of newness, of wholeness that is being bestowed upon you through Jesus. And baptism is you getting up and publicly saying, yes, I am committing to this path. I am stepping into this identity. Well, Eucharist, Lord's Supper, communion, it's the same thing. As we step forward, as we take from the cup and the bread, we are remembering our true identity. Because there's all these other identities that are placed upon us. Identities that we place upon ourselves, that culture places on us. When we come to the table, it's as if those are secondary. And we are being reminded together, I'm a child of God. I don't know what the week has looked like. Maybe you've blown the week. Maybe you don't feel good about yourself in the moment. Maybe everything is going haywire. But when you come to the table, it's a reminder that you're loved and you're accepted. Grace is upon you. And all those other identities, those false identities that we sometimes live with that can take us off our course, we're reminded of our truest identity right here at the table. You are a child of God. And through Christ, you're forgiven. You're accepted. You are invited to this feast that the Lord is setting for you. We're also rejoicing, again, that we are loved, we're accepted by God, very similar. And then there's a sense of anticipation. When we come to the table and we celebrate Eucharist, it's as if it's a foretaste of the heavenly banquet. This meal that all throughout the Bible, we are seeing anticipated year after year. Here's Isaiah 25 on this mountain before Jesus even shows up in this world. On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all people. I love this. God is preparing a banquet, a feast, and it doesn't have meager portions. We're not talking about the scraps. We're talking about the richest food that you can. We're talking like steak and lobster. Anyone else? Like, yeah. What else? Like, what's your favorite dish? I mean, this is the feast that the prophet Isaiah is talking about. It's not just scraps. You aren't secondary to God, but rather God is setting a table of a bountiful feast with the richest food for who? Not just for all people. This invitation is for every single person. God's desire is that all would come to participate and celebrate this feast together. It's a banquet of aged wine. This wine hasn't been sitting in the cellar for a couple of months. This is wine, fine wine that has been aging in the cellar for 30, 40, 50, hundreds, thousands of years. It's the best of meats, the finest of wines. On this mountain, he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all people, all the lies that cover our eyes, that take us away, that distract us. On this mountain, at this feast, God will destroy all of it, the sheet that covers all nations, and he will swallow up death forever. We see this through Jesus. We see the fulfillment of this happening when Jesus arrives. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. Anyone else? Sign me up for that one. You have tears and you're just, man, I need a power, a divine power to come and wipe the pain away on this mountain, this feast. When we celebrate this practice, it's a foretaste of this moment that the prophets, the people who have been following Jesus, are longing for. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. All the shame that you carry within shall be removed from your hearts. It will be no more. The Lord has spoken. In that day, they will say, surely this is our God. We trusted in him. He saved us. This is the Lord. We trusted in him. Let us rejoice and be glad in his salvation. When we celebrate Eucharist together, this is what we are rejoicing in. This is what we are proclaiming together. Then, this is also a meal of remembrance, which raises the question, well, what exactly are we remembering? We are remembering Jesus' table fellowship, all of the meals that Jesus participated in. If you read through the Gospels, you will discover that Jesus participated in many, many meals. That was his common MO. He was always at the table. He was always at Shake Shack or Chipotle or Red Lobster, wherever you want to go. He was always sharing a meal with others. This practice reminds us of all those meals. At the table of Jesus, all were welcome. Here's a quote from the Didache book. I've referenced this one from the beginning by Thomas O'Loughlin, that the kingdom of Jesus was the arrival of the great feast that we just looked at in Isaiah, the beginning of the never-ending banquet of the all-generous Father, rather than the arrival of divine punishment for sinners, can also be seen in a meal. It's a celebration. Jesus ate and drank with his disciples, even when it scandalized the Pharisees and the disciples of John the Baptist. The coming of the Son of Man is not the horror of divine retribution, but it begins with him eating and drinking and inviting everyone, even the sinners, to the table. This is an invitation for all people. This is the celebration that Jesus was constantly inviting others into. So then, what is it that disqualified one from the table? Let's look at a story in Luke. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in, reclined at the table. But the Pharisees were surprised when he noticed Jesus didn't first wash before the meal. Jesus did not follow the law, and the Pharisees started getting upset. Then we begin some of the most damning indictments on the religious institution that Jesus offers in the Gospels. These are often known as the 7 woes of Jesus. The Lord said, "Now then, you Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You follow everything on the outside. Your life looks all cleaned up on the outside, but on the inside, there's rot and there's decay. You're following the law, you're going through the motions, but inside your heart is full of greed and wickedness. There's no integrity to your life. The inside doesn't match the outside. The inside looks good, but the outside could use a little bit of work. You foolish people. Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now, as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you." What disqualified one from the table? A lack of love, a lack of generosity, practicing justice, the posture of your heart. And even that Pharisee was welcome to the table, obviously, because Jesus was there inviting all, but Jesus is saying it's not about the outside. Like, yes, of course that matters, but Jesus is talking about a life that flows from the inside out. And as you look within, and as you begin to address the condition of your heart, well, then the outside will follow. Sometimes in our lives, we try to clean up the outside and we neglect what's happening within. But Jesus is saying that the true power comes from within. The true way of following God and honoring God, blessing God, giving thanks with your life is by addressing that which is within, and then the outer begins to follow. You've probably seen I've seen this in my own life. When you're just addressing the outside, it's like you're walking on a tightrope. You're always worried that you're going to fall off. You're trying to do everything within your own power, and Jesus is saying there's a spirit that wants to transform you from within. And as you're transformed from within, as you open your heart to the power and the transformation that the Spirit brings, well, then the outer follows from there. Jesus is saying it's about your heart and having a heart that is open, that is generous, a heart that is inclined toward justice and love for all people. In Jesus' meals, we also saw the idea of abundance. Are we familiar with this story? A couple of fish, a couple of loaves of bread, fed thousands. Often in our culture, we look at that which we lack. I've heard others call us a culture of scarcity. We look at what we don't have. But through Jesus, we see a life of abundance. The great abundance and generosity of God directed toward you, all of us, this world. And there is enough to go around. Sometimes we have a select few that would try to grab more, and it ends up hurting others. Through the meals that Jesus shared and provided, we are given a glimpse into the truth that there is enough for all and that God will provide for everyone. We are to look at our abundance, that which we have, as opposed to that which we are lacking. Through these meals, we see this idea of grace. Now, we've talked about this over the past couple of weeks, especially during our Lenten series. In the ancient world, the way in which religion worked was you provided a meal for the gods. If you wanted to honor the gods, if you wanted the gods on your side, you would find some of your best meats, your best harvest, and you would go offer that sacrifice to the gods. But with this feast that God is providing, that Jesus is embodying, we find the exact opposite. Instead of humanity offering food and a meal to the gods, we find God providing us with a meal. Everything is flipped upside down. When we come to the table, we are being provided for by God. We don't necessarily bring anything with us. We actually come empty-handed. And that is the best way to approach the table. We come with our hands open to receive all the blessings, the provisions that God has for us. In the ancient world, it was about, what can I give the gods? Well, now it's about, how do we come empty-handed so that we can receive the true meal that God is providing for us. I think this is why all throughout the New Testament, and as we'll see here in the Didache, there are these continual references to why followers of Jesus should not be partaking in food that has been sacrificed to idols, because it's reversing the direction in which the meal is coming from. Concerning food regulations, bear what you are able. However, again, I love this from the Didache. You bear what you're able. We understand perfection, while it might be your goal, it's not necessarily attainable. Grace is to undermine everything about how you see your relationship with God. Because as you accept grace and as you live under grace, I think that is what offers the power of transformation. When it's all about you, there's no longer any need for grace. So bear what you're able. However, here's one regulation. You must keep strictly away from meat that's been sacrificed to idols, for involvement with it involves worship of dead gods. Meat being sacrificed to idols is humanity saying, I am trying to do this on my own. I am trying to summon the gods to me, to be on my side. But as we see here, when we come to the table, the reverse is that which is true. We come empty-handed so that we can receive the grace that only God can provide and bestow upon us. Your sacrifice, and we looked at this a couple of weeks ago, your sacrifice to God is a life of love, generosity, embodying justice. Offer your bodies to God in a way that is pleasing and holy. Your life is to be a living sacrifice in response to the acceptance, the salvation, the wholeness that you have received. We come to the table to celebrate, to be reminded of that which is true. And as we walk out of here, after having come to the table together, we recognize that our response is now to be a life of love for others. This is how we honor God for this meal that has been provided for us. And I came across this. I gave a sermon on this probably about 10 years or so ago. And I want to quote this because to me, this is absolutely mind-blowing. I remember coming across this probably more like 15 years ago. I remember reading this thinking, it just blew my mind. It was so profound. It comes from a scholar, John Mark Hicks. Leviticus 3, 1 through 17, and 7, 11 through 38 describe the various types of fellowship offerings. Now, this term is variously translated fellowship or peace or so on. It comes from the Hebrew word shalom, meaning wholeness or peace. It establishes fellowship, expresses peace between God and the worshiper through a covenant meal. Of the 4 major sacrifices, burnt offering, sin, guilt, and peace, this is the only offering where the worshiper eats part of the sacrifice himself. The sacrificial offering becomes a meal in which bread and drink are also present. Long before Jesus, we see the roots of this practice. The meal celebrates the relationship between the participants in the meal, God and humanity. We come to the table and we're celebrating a meal with God. This isn't just to be some normal, ordinary, forget about it, move on with your day kind of a thing that we do, but rather we are being invited to the table with the divine as God sets a meal for us. And everyone, remember, we're all in this together. We are one. Everyone shares in this meal. The Lord, the priest, the worshiper. It's a meal where God, the priest, and the worshiper share wholeness, peace, salvation through this meal. It exhibits the harmony, peace, well-being of that relationship. If you've ever wondered where do you stand with God, here's your invitation. Where God is saying, I've made peace. Come to the table, experience, accept, live into that truth. Harmony, wholeness is yours through Jesus. Now, may you come to the table with your hands open to accept and to live into that reality. The Passover, which most scholars say is what Jesus was celebrating, the Last Supper, the Passover itself may be regarded as a type of this sacrifice, and Jesus' death has been equated with Passover. We come here to a table where God is saying, you have been made whole, and you don't need to bring anything. You don't even need to bring a salad topping. Which is what you're supposed to bring to the women's lunch. But you don't have to, says the host. There's this participation, this fellowship with God that we are experiencing, rather than us trying to summon some transcendent other God that is somewhere off there distant. And if we offer the right sacrifice, then we can get God to come to us. No. God is right here in this moment at this table. And God is inviting you wherever you find yourself this morning. Now, here's the scandal of the Lord's Supper. Early on, most scholars believe that this wasn't actually a ritual like what we do here on a Sunday morning, but rather this would have been a meal, otherwise known as a love feast or the agape meal. Very similar to what's happening at Ray's house at the women's lunch. It would have been a meal shared by the followers of Jesus, because every table is an altar. And every table, there's a cup and there's bread. So every time you share a meal, it's almost as if you're remembering, oh, here's the sacrifice of Jesus that makes me whole at every single meal. Not just when we do this. See, we have a practice that we do maybe once a month, maybe twice a month sometimes. But for the first followers of Jesus, this remembrance, this practice was something that happened 3 times a day. A regular occurrence. What set this community, followers of Jesus, apart was that this sharing of food, it cut right across the social stratifications of the ancient world, and indeed its dining practice. The poor and the rich ate together. This didn't happen in the ancient world. The poor, they'd have their own table, maybe their own room. Maybe they didn't even have a table. But at this practice, the poor and the rich ate together. The slaves shared a table with their masters. Women ate with men. The outcasts ate with the religiously pure. The Gentiles sat next to the Jew, and all prayed to the Father and thanked him for sending his Son. Eventually, the social mixing, it was too much for the people to take, as it often happens with us humans. We see the difficulties already in Corinth in the late 40s, where the rich didn't want to have to share with the poor. Eventually, the meal will become a token affair that was wholly ritualized. A meal, a feast, that was to happen together, that would cut through all the boundaries that typically separate us, was turned into a ritual that was practiced not as frequently. Then real eating together disappeared. Although the memory of that new community of love that Jesus proclaimed, it would always be held. And here's the memory that we're practicing this morning, at least in the imagination by subsequent generations. The Lord's Supper, Eucharist, it became too revolutionary. It was too much. Because this type of life that we were being invited into by Jesus, it was too much for followers because it mixed things up too much. And we like our boundaries. We like being with our group and then having that group over there and then this group here. And it's saddening to read about this. The invitation this morning is, this week and subsequent weeks, to remember that every meal you're sharing is an opportunity to remember the wholeness, the acceptance, the salvation of Jesus that is yours. We don't need a ritual. I mean, rituals are powerful. They're important, of course. It's why we do it, because we need these reminders, because we all know how our weeks go. But the invitation is that you don't have to wait for this moment at church. Whenever you break bread, whenever you share a meal, you can be reminded of the feast that God is preparing, that God is inviting you into. Whenever you need a reminder of how much you're loved, of the true identity that has been offered, given to you, you just need to have a meal. And then share that meal with others and find your heart being filled with gratitude. And then you walk from there, offering your life as an act of love. As you are now broken open and poured out for the healing of this world. This isn't meant to be something that we participate in and then go back to ordinary life, but now we are invited into that same way of being that we see embodied in Jesus. So as you come to the table this morning, may your hands be empty and open. May you come to receive. May you be reminded of your truest identity. However you might be feeling about yourself in the moment, may you be reminded of that which is true. You're accepted. You're made whole. You are deeply loved. So may that truth wash over any falsities that you're carrying within you. And then as you walk out of here this morning, may your life be broken open and poured out in love for the world around you.